First up this morning, I am delighted to welcome Angus Cunningham. Angus is the founder and CEO of Scottscape. Scottscape provide award-winning, innovative green infrastructure services throughout the UK and Europe with living walls, living pillars, landscape construction and ground maintenance. Angus, it's great to have you this morning, and you'll be discussing greening the grey.
Thank you very much, Cora, for your kind words. Yes, I'm over the water, and I believe I've got 20 minutes to get as much information as possible over on biodiversity. So, can you see my screen? Because there we go. So, we are an innovation-led company, and our passion is bringing biodiversity to the built environment. And before I start, though, very important biodiversity, because we've got a distinct lack of it. If you were to look up the definition in the dictionary, this is what you'd get, and I'll quickly read it. The variety of plant and animal life in the world or in a particular habitat, and for this CPD, this is the urban environment, a high level of which is usually considered to be important and desirable. Well, we're saying that biodiversity is far more than important. It's absolutely necessary. Biodiversity is nature, and we are the problem. We humans have been pushing nature out, and this is our challenge. We see lack of biodiversity as big a challenge as climate change. So I put a new definition together, which I've also got from the dictionary, but is more appropriate. Biodiversity is the variety of all living things on Earth and how they fit together in the web of life, bringing oxygen, water, food, and countless other benefits. We're the problem. We've been displacing biodiversity. Now, I've got a well-known venue here. I'm sorry it's not Croke Park. And if I'd had my wits about me, I should have got an image together. This, in fact, is Wembley in 1923. And this is Wembley in 2020. So it's not so much the stadium, it's what's happened around the stadium. This is our challenge. And I'm told it's happening in Ireland as well, even though I think Dublin is a green city. You've also got a fairly hefty built environment. Cities are getting bigger. By 2050, London will have another 3 million inhabitants, and that's putting huge pressure on biodiversity. It's called biodiversity displacement. That's a nice word for it. Now, in the UK, we've got an environment bill that was ratified actually during COP26. And this helps measure biodiversity, because this is a big issue, right? If you're taking biodiversity out, and there's going to be a new law saying you must put 10% back in, I'm not sure in Ireland, but this is the case in London. How do you measure biodiversity? There's a matrix here, which I don't want to spend a load of time on, but it's simplifying the measure of biodiversity. 1 is maximum points, 0 is minimum points. So you can see 0 would be a concrete paving stone. There is no biodiversity value to putting paving down, hard landscaping. Whereas you can get a 1 for putting woodland in. I've been speaking to Jer about this. Woodland or species-rich grassland or wetlands, that's also a maximum. And you can see living walls are giving a 0.6, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about. So wouldn't it be great if we could get trees growing in our living walls? So what we're about, biodiversity. We encourage biodiversity into urban spaces. Why we do it? We want to improve the environment, so that placemaking and wayfinding. We want cities to be more sustainable and healthy places to live and work. After all, the population that's increasing is going to live in cities, not in the countryside. Thank goodness, we say, let's keep ourselves in the city and make them healthy. And how are we improving biodiversity? We want to share our knowledge. We are an innovation-led company, and we've got some great tools in our toolbox. So before I get into living walls and living pillars, briefly, how I started my journey. This is the village in the borders of Scotland where I was brought up and learned my love of nature. I was born to 2 parents who were amazing gardeners and were incredibly sustainable. In those days, it was called thrifty and Scottish. We lived off the land. Trips to the supermarket were rare. Nowadays, it's come back in vogue. It is about sustainability. This is my first van. I headed down to London. The bright lights lured me down at the age of 20. I got a job at the Royal Hospital Chelsea, where the Chelsea Flower Show is held. But my impatience was to the fore, and after a year at the Royal Hospital, I joined the ranks of the self-employed with a garden maintenance round in Wimbledon, of all places, and it was tools in my dad's old army kit bag on the tube. And from there, Scottscape has grown to be a leading innovative company with a number of really clever methods of bringing biodiversity to the built environment. There's about 150 of us in the company. They're all much younger than me, I'm pleased to say, and full of energy. And I wheeled out as a CEO and founder with a very grown-up title to try and tell you about our products. So we do have a product ecosystem. And what I want to talk to you about today are the living walls. They're kind of old hat for us now, but they're still very topical. Planting microforests, living pillars, which is our new innovation, a clever way of covering lampposts. Design and plant knowledge, I think, is a whole new topic for another day, but suffice it to say that we need designers to be able to design the right plants to do the right job. Gone are the days when planning permission would be given if you put a patch of green in a tree in position. Now, certainly in the UK, we're being asked to say what plants are doing what and how much of what are they doing, i.e. how much carbon they're trapping, how much nitrous oxide. And to boot, we've got technology now that can maintain our clever systems in the built environment. So I think I'll start with living walls. Fairly topical slide. We were up at COP last week with a number of our clever innovations. But a living wall basically is a clever way of covering a wall with plants. It requires irrigation. I've got a short clip and I'll talk you through it. So you can be a bit clever, as we were up in COP. You can plant plants to give a message, but our system is designed for long-term plant use. And here's an example. This is a sacrificial 1 meter square of living wall. This was taken 5 years ago. And we thought it'd be great to take out the back of the living wall to show you what happens to the plant. So you saw in the front, it was very healthy. In the back, you see the root spread, healthy roots, healthy plants. So before you put a living wall up, you must put it on a subframe to get some air gap between the back of the living wall and the wall. That's good practice. And then we'll put our system, it's a fabric system, as you saw, on top of the subframe. And then you plant it. It's as easy as that. As long as you've got water and light going to the living wall, the plants will survive. The key really is the irrigation. And much of the cost, we do get stymied somewhat on how much living walls cost. It's not so much the plants and the fabric, it's the access. And here we see this is a project at London Bridge, Team London Bridge it was called. Here was after it was completed, planting was completed. And then 4 weeks ago, I paid another visit on a particularly dreich and rainy day. And here we can see, due to that amazing root growth, the roots can spread throughout the whole system. We can get 2 meter depth of planting. And then we thought, hey, wouldn't it be a great idea? And we're serious about bringing biodiversity into the built environment. Why don't we plant trees in the living wall? And this is our proof of concept wall. This has got trees which are up to 5 meters tall. And the same thing, roots can spread throughout the whole wall. A set of gates, put walls on gates. I think, get with it, get modern. You don't need to plant in borders anymore. You can plant over any angle. Here's a Nissen hut, which has up to 90 degrees right round to 45 and 0 at the top. We can do indoor planting. Of course, you need the correct light. We can cover buildings. It's not rocket science anymore. Water and light, that's the key to living walls. I'm going to talk about these shortly. These are our living pillars. Our fabric is very flexible. It can go around a living pillar, go around a lamppost, thus forming a living pillar. And this is an All England 10. Again, you can be clever with your planting and get messages across. There's a couple of tennis rackets, again, at Wimbledon. Inside planting, again, pretty straightforward, just water and light. And I think the big challenge with indoors is making water move away from the bottom of the planting. This is in Malaga in Spain. We can, instead of rain screen cladding, that's a whole nother topic, but you can put plants in instead of your rain screen cladding, but you need to get in ahead of the design of the building. Now, we all know that plants can Plants clean the air, all plants clean the air, but we are about biodiversity. That is why we put our living walls in. And here's a wall that I went to see recently at AstraZeneca. At their new office block, we were commissioned to build a biodiversity living wall. And I went up there, and sure enough, there was some biodiversity on the wall, which made my heart sing. Forgive the Harris fencing. I was told it was all finished, but I need to get back up to take a final picture. But we can't get away. It is about biodiversity. And if we can put the correct plants in, we can bring biodiversity right back into the towns. There's a nice little robin hatching her brood. So I'm pressing my clicker and nothing's happening, Thomas. There we go. So a few facts. This particular project, this is one I showed on the video, a couple of takeouts from this. This is run from rainwater harvesting. You can see the orange pipe down the left-hand side of the screen. This is taking rainwater down to an underground tank, and from that tank it goes back in the wall. And then the gutter, there's a black gutter underneath the living wall with a black downpipe that also goes into the rainwater harvesting tank, and so all water is recycled. And I believe this is the first living wall that relies completely on rainwater. And obviously we're great advocates, and it's a bit of a interesting point that we spent years building our cities, making sure rainwater was moved out as quickly as possible, otherwise they get really muddy in the 1700s and 1800s. And now we're saying, hey, we want to hang on to our water more. We want to put tanks in to help water the plants. So the takeout from these two slides, quite interesting. I said to my wife when I was putting the presentation together, what do these two slides do for you? And she said, well, by the way, she knew nothing about the biodiversity value in the picture on the right. She said, well, I'd go to the place on the right, but I wouldn't go to the place on the left. I think that's a really interesting point, because this is the wow factor of living walls. They are, of course, the same place. So by putting greenery up on a wall, you still get a wow factor. And that's really important with some bids we're working with in the UK to attract footfall. I think COVID has helped. We were locked in our houses. We wanted to get out. We didn't want to go back to the city centre. We wanted to go and see greenery. So this is what's generating our market. And here's the case study on the woodland wall. Our proof of concept, planting on the left, 5 years later, we've got trees growing on the right-hand side. So we will coppice the trees. We don't want them to get too big, but it just goes to show if you put good cover in, you can get good biodiversity. So to wrap up living walls, really a great wow factor. You can't knock it. With our fabric, you can give us a structure, give us some water, you can put living walls up. The costs are really dependent on how challenging the planting is, and the locations can be challenging. And this leads us nicely on to our next product, which is we've called it the living pillar. It's a clever way of covering lampposts with sustainable planting. And here's a short video clip of some pillars going up. And more importantly, the fabric, which is all important to sustain long-term plant growth, being made. It's made of 3 layers. This is the waterproof layer, so nothing will come out of the back of the system. And being fabric, roots can spread throughout the whole wall. So if you plant a tree in one corner, the roots will spread as far as they need to spread. And we have access to the irrigation on the front, because typically with living walls, if there's a problem, it'll be the irrigation. So we have good access to all our pipe work. This is the innovation, one of them that we took up to COP26 as a clever way of bringing greenery back into built environment. And you know what? We would plant a tree 10 times out of 10, but this is what we've got in our pavements. And they're there because we're all living in towns. We need services, but that's the challenge. So very Scottish, I know, but why not use an existing resource like a lamppost to bring green in? You can get a lamp which is doing one thing, doing 2 things or 3 things that bring green in, which is good for humans, and biodiversity, which is great for the planet. So taking a step back, the concept was developed but with Grosvenor, or well, not with Grosvenor, but we used them as our stamping ground. We were asked to advise them on how to bring green into their built environment. They saw their Grosvenor own a pretty smart part of about 300 acres in the centre of London, the nice bit of London, Knightsbridge, and they said they reckoned that if they greened up their streets, they would get plus 10% increase in rentals, and their property prices have got by the same amount. And they wanted their place, their area green, so commuters would be going through it on their way into commute into the city. But the challenge was finding somewhere to put the living walls. We have a great system, which we know, but you can see on this picture, where do you put a living wall? So this was the light bulb moment for the living pillars, the lamps going down the centre of the street. Crikey, why don't we turn them into trees? Wouldn't that be great? We can wrap our fabric around them. Hey, yeah, if we these are like green corridors going into the middle of town, biodiversity stations. We can get birds nesting in them. And that was the idea, and that was 4 years ago. And here they're designed to go over lampposts without damaging the lamppost. And rather than spend a while talking you through all these stages, you can see our fabric in the reservoir at the bottom of the planting. And once we designed the concept, the proof of concept was put together at our HQ. And this is a 4 meter amount of planting, which was our test bed. And you can see the biodiversity that we can get in with the planting. That's a Hebe. And when you're up close and personal to one of these pillars, 4 meters planting is a lot of planting on a post. And we can do bling, we can do colours. And if we're lucky, we get some birds in the pillars as well. So I'll talk you through quickly 3 of the challenges we have, because when you're using an existing bit of infrastructure, there are challenges. So the first one was streets are kind of inhospitable places. They're very windy, and we wanted to watch the water usage. The solution to this challenge was we put another fabric, which is called Aqua-10, within our system, and that holds on to water, retains water. So it means we use less water. And we also are involved with an app, which allows us to control the water. And it will tell us how, and basically the app, the technology in the app enables a plant to call on water, because when we were setting these up, we decided as humans, we know best. We can say how many cycles and how many minutes in each cycle. But the sensors in our living pillar enable the plant to call on water, because streets have different climates. So you might be in a shady part, in a sunny part. Most of them are windy, some are not. So it makes sense for the plant to say when it needs water. Maintenance costs. Yes, they all need maintenance. Living walls need maintenance, but the big maintenance that we have or cost is water. So we need to put water in the reservoir at the bottom. So wouldn't it be great if we were told when we need to put water in the reservoir, i.e. not go around just willy-nilly and top them up because we felt they needed topped up. And the last challenge, or big challenge that we had, was the loading. But when you put loading on a lamppost, you need someone to say how much loading can take. So we did a wind tunnel test on our system. So we got all the calculations. The clever guys worked it out. We will carry out a non-destructive test. That means we'll push the lamppost. Here's a little bit of kit pushing the lamppost, and that will tell us how much planting we can put on the lamppost. But if the lamppost won't take the loading, put a new lamppost in. If we put a new lamppost in, you can get planting all the way to the top. I'm happy, biodiversity is happy, and that lamppost will last 25 years. And here's we've just gone to market this year with our living pillars. It has a patent pending. We hope we'll be through an international patent by Christmas. And here's one of the orders that we received for Canary Wharf in London. You'll be able to put up 3 to 4 living pillars a day. They're designed to last forever. We have various levels of maintenance that we offer, but really we'd rather work with the districts. If you've got contractors who are watering hanging baskets, we can. You have to have the app, but we'll let you know. The app will tell you when these need filled up with water. Same principle. There's no water wastage. All the water is recirculated. So very exciting times for our living pillars. So the takeout from our living pillar. Sorry, I'm waiting for the slides to move on. Am I doing all right for time, Thomas? we can't forget that if we get insects into our living pillars, the birds will follow. That's really important. No grey squirrels up our lampposts, no vermin. Biodiversity can do its stuff. And I think during autumn maintenance, obviously not before when we're nesting, you get to clean out the nest boxes. And that blue tit raised a brood of, very obligingly at our test centre, raised a brood of 5 chicks who all successfully flew the nest. But there you are, up close and personal, at 8 metres tall, with some planting. So the fact file on the living pillars, I've explained about the green corridors. And sorry, I'm aware I'm trying to squeeze 40 minutes into 20, so I'm talking at a rate of knots. They're fully sustainable using solar power. The technology allows for planned maintenance. We do think there's advertising opportunities on the reservoir. We're working with Toshiba with some air quality sensors, which can provide information right back via your app, live feed to your phone. And if you buy 1 to 5, they cost £3,000. That's a whole lot plus maintenance. Over 5, you get some lovely big discounts. And from a Scotsman, that's news indeed. So hopefully I've got time to talk about microforests, because this is our passion. If we had room in the pavement, we'd be planting trees. If you dug the roads up, we'd be planting trees. There's a chap called Akira Miyawaki, who is a Japanese botanist in the 70s. He's becoming quite famous now, but he had this passion for growing trees in degraded land, i.e. in city centres. And he can get trees to grow really quickly. And of course, music to our ears. So we've developed some tech behind the growing of the trees. The first thing we do is we test the soil. Typically, it's waterlogged and compacted, because that's what our parks are like. So we will fire some air to decompact the ground, and then we'll mix up some mycorrhiza and organic nutrients and biochar, and we'd fire that into the ground, into the fissures that have been created by the injection of air, and that will keep the fissures open, and that provides the ideal subsoil for roots for trees to go into. And you can see we've done that without disturbing the top layer of grass, so there's no carbon released into the atmosphere by digging up the grass. As a result of that, well, after that, we bring in 4 inches of mineral-rich topsoil. We'll spread it over the top, and then here's the secret. We buy cell-grown trees. Okay, they're very small, they're 40 centimetres tall, but we have a huge success rate because the roots aren't disturbed. And we can get the community to engage with us in planting, because all kids and young adults and elderly people can plant into 4 inches of soil, because it's friable. You don't have to dig. It's not hard work. And it's incredibly satisfying. So as a result of following that process, obviously trees, as I said at the beginning, you get max points for biodiversity. We get a very big survival rate. Sorry, I'm trying to find my pointer. The trees grow 8 times quicker because they're in competition with each other. When we design these microforests, we have 4 layers. We have an upper structure, a middle, a low, and a ground level planting. And when they're planted densely, 3 to 4 per square metre, we let them go. We just say, go, nature, do your stuff. Very little maintenance. We put a mulch down to cover to keep the moisture in and suppress the weeds. Area about the size of a tennis court. Cost in landscaping terms is a very good cost at £60 per square metre. That includes all the preparation work. So I'm very excited about the forests, and we think in our parklands, this is what we can do. Here's one we were involved with in Dagenham in southeast London. They used a different method. It was an early method, the same small trees going in, but they actually dug the soil over. So with our technology, we get over that hurdle. Here are the trees going in. Very small. They were planted this time last year, so I'm due to go back to film them. And here's some drone footage of the area. So that's a big area. There's about 8 tennis courts in there, but you don't have to obviously do a rectangle. And we did plant a big forest at Somerset House not so long ago in June, which generated a huge amount of interest. I've been chatting with Jer about this, and we've used all these trees in the councils, the neighbouring boroughs. So I'm nearly at the end. Design and planting, it's all about the plants. As I said, every plant does some good. They all trap particulates, they all trap carbon. They can all bring biodiversity. The skill of the designer is putting the right plants in the right places to do the right job. Now, just a word of caution. We've got all this clever stuff. We can do it. It's not a problem. But if you're putting living walls up, you've got to maintain them. If you can maintain them, you've got to get men there, or women, and they've got to prune. So there's a very iconic shot on the right of a wall we put up in 2009 in East London, but it was hugely expensive to maintain because we had to send abseilers down it. So bear that in mind when you're designing. Quickly on Scottscape, we're about giving back. We support Green Fingers Charity, who build hospices for hospice gardens for children. Very worthwhile. We gave them all the shrubs from the Somerset House Forest for Change, and they get 1% of our turnover. So my last three messages: bringing biodiversity in for wayfinding and placemaking is easy, but it needs collaboration. So you need to give us the places that you can use our system. We've got a company called Green Scene just outside Dublin who will be able to install. We have some great innovative smart solutions, but we need your help. The future's bright, a bit corny, the future's green. And here's 30 seconds of how easy it could be. That's me finished. The last video didn't play, but I hope I got through in my time and haven't messed up the timetable too much.
Thank you, Angus Cunningham. That was fascinating. I thought greening the grey is something that you could do to the top of my head. Yeah, the living pillars, the microforest, the walls, and it's fascinating to learn that it's practically, there's no limits what you can do with spaces and public and private assets. So there's probably a huge amount of potential in public and private spaces here in Sandyford Business District. So thank you. That was very enjoyable.